As president of the Coalition for Canadian Police Reform, I am particularly pleased to welcome everyone and thank you all for attending. I am really enheartened by the large attendance today and, of course, the continued interest in our important work. I'd like to open this webinar today by acknowledging that we are on the traditional territories of the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. An important step in reconciliation is our acknowledgement of traditional land. As most of you are aware, there have been countless studies, commissions of inquiry, inquests, examinations, and reports recommending national training and education standards for our police officers, guided by a College of Policing. The most recent being the Mass Casualty Commission recommendations, focusing on modernizing police education and research, and the Sami-Yatin Coroner's Inquest in Ontario recommending a national certification criteria and the establishment of a College of Professional Policing. The need for national training standards for our police officers, like all other professions, has been well established. The challenge now is to determine how to achieve this in Canada. I am very pleased and must thank our moderator and our panelists today for bringing their unique knowledge and experience to address this important issue. Policing is an honorable and principled profession. Every police officer in Canada deserves to have the benefit of critical thinking skills and current knowledge in order to face the challenges of our complex, diverse, and demanding 21st century social issues. Collectively, all of us and the many police stakeholder groups must find a way to make this happen. Our webinar today is planned for no more than 90 minutes. I encourage everyone to participate by submitting your questions and comments in the chat. Our moderator will draw from these questions. Just before we begin, I thought I'd recognize two individuals in attendance today and thank them for attending. Jennifer Chambers, the Executive Director of the Empowerment Council, working with the Centre for Addictions and Mental Health in Canada, and Dr. Anne Easton, Associate Head, Department of Policing, University of the West of England, overseeing the Police Constable degree, apprenticeship, and degree holder programs in England. I welcome both of you. I am now particularly pleased to introduce Matt Torigian. Matt has agreed to introduce our panelists and moderate this important webinar. Matt is a former Deputy Solicitor General for the Province of Ontario and former Chief of the Waterloo Regional Police Service. Currently, Matt is the Chief Strategy Officer, Public Safety for Niche Technology. During his time as Deputy Minister, Matt was responsible for a broad portfolio that included the OPP, public safety, police education and training, the monitoring and inspections of police services and boards, and Criminal Intelligence Service of Ontario. Matt is a distinguished fellow with the Monk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy and provides advice on policing and security to police and government officials on 4 continents. More importantly, Matt is a strong supporter of our coalition, and I'm pleased. Matt, thank you for being with us today, and welcome.
Well, thank Dave, and thank you everybody for being a part of this today, and especially to the coalition for the work that you've been doing, especially over the last number of months and really, I think, years. Dave, you and I probably talked about this quite some time ago, and you and John and I know Mike Fedorico and others that have been integral to you moving a lot of the conversation forward and the webinars that you've put together. I will introduce the panelists in just a second. I just do want to say that, I know we've got an hour to an hour and a half. We're starting a little late, so we won't go into big, long introductions, but because I want to give enough time for both Chief McSween and Chief Abela to speak on what is obviously a very important discussion right across the country. And as you noted, there have been commissions, inquiries, reviews, and inquests. The concept of a College of Policing has been at the forefront of a lot of the discussions. What we hope to accomplish today in this conversation is to unpack a little bit about what it is and why it is that we've been talking about a College of Policing. And in particular, the why in all of this is the furthering and perhaps the professionalization through some whether it's a certification or just training standards or educational standards or whatever the case may be, But let's talk about the professionalization of policing within the context and within the concepts of a college of policing. And in that regard, and as Dave mentioned, if you have questions and you want to put them in the chat, that's great. If you are a contributor and you want to raise your hand and you have something to ask, that would be great too. I do want to say we did have 3 panelists. Unfortunately, at the last minute, there's a, as we always know, there are to be on times a operational imperative for Chief Jerry Swamp from Rama Police Service, First Nations Police Service in Ontario, and he can't make it today. But we are extremely grateful for the time that both Chief McSween and Chief Abela are contributing to this conversation. I'm going to introduce both of them right now, and then Chief McSween, I'll turn it over to you for your opening comments, and then over to Chief Abela. But just as an introduction, Chief McSween is with the York Regional Police Service. He is the president of the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police and a recipient of the Governor General's Exemplary Service 20-year medal. He completed 30 years of policing back in 2019, so he's been in this game a long time, like many of us. But I think what's really important for us to hear from Chief McSween is that certainly in Ontario, if not across the country, York Regional Police Service has been and continues to be an innovator and one of the more progressive police services in the country. And under the Chief's leadership, and he'll talk a lot about some of his perspectives on the professionalization and the work, that great work that YRP is engaged in. Chief Graham Abela from Taber, Alberta, Chief of Police with Taber, Alberta. Chief Abela is not enough just to be the Chief of Police. He's also has a master's degree in leadership and training from Royal Roads University and a doctorate in education in leadership. He's a published author. Recently, about a year ago, published on this very topic, the professionalization of policing, published in the Journal of Community Safety and Wellbeing, which is, I think, Canada's only journal dedicated to community safety and well-being, and it's now read in 150 countries around the world. It's open access, it's free. It's my shameless plug. I volunteer as a senior contributing editor. You can go on, register, and sign up and get these great original research papers, but also, and in the case of Chief Abela's report paper, a social innovation narrative, and talking about this very topic, professionalization of policing. Chief McSween, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you, and then I'll ask Chief Abela to speak.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks to Dave and John as well for getting us all involved here. Really critical discussion to be having at this time, and I think, you know, I know I'm just giving some opening remarks here, but I think there's a lot to unpack here around some of the things that are going on around the country. You've already referenced, or Dave already referenced, you know, the inquests and outcomes of some of these major incidents that have really shined a light on policing as the backdrop for why we have to have this conversation. And then we need to have a real conversation about why is there so much resistance from some points of view. You know, I can tell you in some ways, I've heard from various associations that you know, they're not really in favor of this. So you know, the one thing I'll say is that with the first of its kind in the country, the new Inspector General's office, this is probably the absolute right time for us to see some change and work with the ministry to figure out what that change could look like. And I think the appetite is there. I've had some conversations with Ryan Tessner, our Inspector General here in the province, over the last few months. So, I mean, I can leave it at that for now because I know we're going to get right into it shortly. But I really thank you for having me here, and happy to participate in the discussion. And hopefully we'll get to another side of this discussion at the end of today and see a way forward. Thank you, Matt.
No, thanks, Chief. Over to you, Chief Abela.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for the invite to come here and be able to participate. I think the coalition's been doing some great work, and I've listened to many of the webinars that have happened over the last year, and yeah, I learned a lot. And I'm coming today from my discussion from a framework in which I think the assumptions I've already assumed that most of us on this call today are of the opinion that professionalization model, or professionalizing the police in Canada is a good thing. So I'm actually not going to speak to the inquests or to the rationale to establish why I think, I could speak to it, but I'm not going to today. I think we can spend our better time addressing some of the barriers or challenges as to why, this is taking some time, why decisions aren't being made. And yeah, I look forward to contributing that way when the questions are asked. So thanks again for having me. Looking forward to it today.
Thanks, Chief. Perhaps to kick this off, we can talk a little bit about, because you both touched on it a little, and we'll get to resistance in a second. But I think before we get to resistance, it might be good to hear from both of you as far as what you think it is. When we talk about a college of policing, and I can tell you from my experience, when I was Deputy Solicitor General and providing that executive vision and leadership on not just the Inspector General, but integral to the Inspector General's office, we also received high policy approval for a Public Safety Institute, which was born from the review that Justice Tulloch did, where one of his recommendations for the province when we were rewriting the Police Act was to have a college of policing. And what it was the development of curriculum and education for policing in the province that was rooted in research and evidence and the rigor that is behind that would help inform the development of curriculum at the police college that informs standards. Those standards are inspected against by the Inspector General for compliance, and now you have a closed loop full circle. So that's what it was intended to be. But we've heard a lot about some people thinking it's another regulatory body, or it's an oversight body, it's a disciplined body, very similar to the College of Physicians and Surgeons or the Law Society of Upper Canada. So from both the Ontario perspective and the Alberta perspective, what is it? What is a college in the conversations that you're having? Chief McSween, maybe to start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, from my perspective, a college is exactly what you had said was envisioned way back when. You have to have an industry standard to start with. And I think part of the challenge is that, if it's not buried in the adequacy standard to make sure there are various things in adequacy that we all have to, measure ourselves to and make sure we have in each of our police services. But, everybody does it a little bit differently. Some people have it to a higher level than others, and there really isn't a measurement to make sure the standard that has rigor, that is evidence-based and reinforced through academic institutions, that's not there. In Ontario, we have the Ontario Police College. We send all of our recruits there, and that's great. That's a standard. And then they all go back out into the field. And by the time, 5 years into their careers, they're doing the job in various different ways, depending on the size of your service, depending on where you are in the province, depending on what the culture is in your police service, which is a big piece to this. So I think that's really it in a nutshell. And I really think the inspectorate has to play a role here to help devise what that standard is, because, and I'll get into our leadership program later, because it is actually trying to move us in that regard, just around the one topic of leadership, but devising a standard. Academia is involved, measuring it, and then pushing it out in a set of training anchored to the values. That should be what, and I think that's how you close that loop, is that once you get that standard devised and everybody's training to it and everybody has to pass through it, there's a measurement on the other end, an ongoing measurement, and it does become an adequacy standard at the ministry level to make sure that what the inspectorate measures in every police service is exactly what the college envisions as the standard. So I can leave it there maybe and turn it over to Graham for his thoughts, but that's how I would see it, unless you have something.
Well, Graham, Chief, when you wrote your paper, if I recall correctly, there was a lot more to it as well, wasn't there? And I appreciate that the education and the training that happens in Ontario is different from Alberta, but perhaps you could talk a little bit about what you envisaged there. And if I recall correctly, you were even talking about a regulatory body of some sort and discipline body, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think, one of the challenges that we have is the definition of what we consider a professional college really hasn't been, put to paper yet. We have the vision, but I don't think we actually have the model. And I think we need kind of agreement on that to move forward in that discussion to get some traction. But yeah, no, I totally agree. The framework that we put together as a model in 2019, myself and 2 other authors, we contributed to a document that we submitted to the Ministry of Justice and Solicitor General at the time, outlining actually a model for what a professional college in Alberta could look like. And, it did contain the gamut of the professional model, which is certification of police officers, research and evidence-based practice, disciplinary regulations associated to it, basic induction training, foundational education training, standards associated to those that are measured, validated, and tested for policing by policing. I can go on forever to talk about that. Similar actually to what the UK has done. We did replicate it off of best practices that have been established, elsewhere, and even to the point where we tried to morph it a little bit to adapt for some of the challenges that some of those other countries that have attempted police professionalization. Some of the mistakes that have happened there, we've tried to overcome them through different policy or I guess frameworks, right? Different ways of doing things. I think we didn't get a lot of traction in Alberta. It did. I know it got on the minister's desk, and I know that some of the concepts in the Police Act change that's happened, it did drive a little bit of those discussions. I can tell you at the Chiefs table, when we sat and we put this forward to the Chiefs of Police in Alberta, there wasn't consensus at the Chiefs table that actually we should move forward with this concept of professionalization. And so, one of the challenges that we have is to try to get consensus even amongst the chiefs as to what this needs to look like to move forward as a profession ourselves within the culture of policing. So, but I think the time's right. Like, there's lots of little pockets of practice that are occurring across the country. Some of the stuff that I'm really excited about, is the work that's being done by Jim and also CPKN associated to the leadership competency frameworks that are being developed. I'll let Jim speak to that because I think that's his the sandbox that he's going to play in today. But we have Manitoba making some major initiative changes around the Police Act and governance models of what's going on there. Our Police Act is open in Alberta. We're looking. I can't say it's open. We have the Police Amendments Act. That's causing some changes within new regulation being developed. So I got a frog in my throat here today. Sorry about that, but I think the time's right where we as police chiefs can start the road to professionalizing policing, as long as we all kind of have that vision and model that someone can develop for us that we can actually physically see. I think we need to see it. I think that's one of the barriers we need to talk about.
Why do you think you didn't even get the buy-in from other chiefs in Alberta? What was their concern, if you can recall, and without outing anybody, just on a high level?
Yeah, I'm not going to out anyone for sure. Those are confidential conversations, but I can tell you, I think there's a fear, right? There's a fear in the concept of professionalization because, as been experienced in other countries, creating a professional college actually removes some authority and power from the position of chief of police, from the office of the chief of police. And that, it's a control issue. Let's be serious, if we're going to be serious about it, it's a control issue. And, chiefs of police, as well-intentioned and as well-educated and as well as experienced as they are, think they have the right answer. and within their executive departments and with their teams, they're doing the best that they can. But I think to get to that next level of building trust and confidence with the public, and in a democratic environment of policing like we have in Canada, the public, the feedback that we're getting, they're not really trusting those decisions anymore. So this isn't actually about policing. For me, it's about the public. And it's about the public's expectation of where we need to go as police agencies and as policing nationally, and build on that, like the other professional bodies have done.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned CPKN, because I think and the great work that Sandy Sweet and others have been doing, and the board that Sandy has at CPKN over the last number of years and years and years, I think illustrates the thirst for knowledge and the thirst for education out there that police officers are asking for and striving for, and CPKN has done a formidable job of educating police officers and police members across the country, because they know that they want it, and they've got a place to go, and it's developed in a way that and delivered in a way that works. So I think Chief McSween, you're very involved with CPKN and also this leadership program that you referenced earlier. Perhaps you can talk about that.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And we just wanted to agree with Graham as well that he's bang on with some of the rationale around, the hesitancy. I think there's a fear there as well. I agree with that. That's why I was nodding my head. But I will give a shout out to Sandy and the team at CPKN, because they are doing and have done some tremendous work around this whole leadership philosophy and the competencies, which was why as we built a program here in York Region that's just we've just rolled it out about 8 months ago. It's in partnership with the Schulich School of Business. It's an accredited program. There are 5 different streams, and it's a hire to retire program. So, our philosophy here, anyways, on this program is we should start their leadership journey for any new member 3 years into their career, not after they get their first promotion. So turning that on its head a bit, and it developed into 5 streams: personal leadership, developing leadership, engaging leadership, visionary leadership, and then the last one being executive leadership in stream 5. So we've taken that philosophy now, and we've through our training and education committee at the OACP, we've pulled together all of the stakeholders we believe need to be in that conversation. And a lot of those stakeholders are ministry officials, academia. Schulich is there, De Groot is there, Sandy and the team from CPKN are there, as well as the IG's office. So, because I've spoken about this to the IG's office, and I'm not suggesting in any way that type of program is the be all end all of the college, but I really think the philosophy of how we're building this is something that moves you towards a college, because I think we have a lot of the pieces of a college out there running right now, right? And Graham touched on different programs here or there. If you look at the IC program, the IC 100 to 500 they're building now, that's nationally recognized. That program is trained the same way across the entire country, and it's an industry standard. Well, taking that or a leadership program and everything else that we do that is accredited and backed up by evidence and academia, we really have a lot of the pieces already in place in many cases to actually bring them in and standardize and then push out through a college. So I think the biggest issue, the biggest challenge is what Graham was talking about. It's getting agreement, having everyone agree that this is in the best interest of the communities that we serve, and maybe let our egos down a bit and not be so concerned about loss and look at it as a huge win for public safety and for the entire profession, because we call ourselves a profession. but we truly don't operate as a profession, and a college actually gives you the ability to be really looked at as a designated profession, right? And let's just call it what it is and be honest. When we have conversations about onboarding new people into our organizations, and the minimum standard is still a grade 12 education, that argues against the need for a college. So it's a bit of a caution, I would say, from any ministry members that are saying, hey, we want to get more people in the profession, but we got to make sure they're trained and they have the abilities to do the job. So I'll leave it at that. But I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and a lot of the right people looking at it. And if we can get agreement, that's probably the first step. But I use these little pockets like leadership as almost a pilot, and I think on this, we're going to have to show some evidence, and we're going to have to develop something that says, here's an accredited program. Now let's accredit everything and turn it into a college, right? So yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, it's obviously not by accident that you decided, in your organization decided, to partner with an academic institution in the development of the leadership training. And that was very much part of the concept, the original concept of a college of policing in Ontario. And from the comments, one of the comments in there is, at the time, the hesitation, and there's a few comments talking about, fear, or what you said, Chief, about maybe the ego or the fear of looking like as if police leaders don't have all the answers, because let's face it, it's an occupational hazard to solve the problem, and yet what it wasn't was a disciplinary body. What it wasn't was a regulatory body. We wanted to put a standard in place that you must have this education, and the curriculum for those educational courses had to come from a partnership with academia, because it's not just academic institutions that are deriving the curriculum. There's an experience component to this, and I think that's the CPKN model as well, which is why it's so successful. And yet, purposely or otherwise, the conversation kept going back to what it wasn't, not what it can achieve. And I find it interesting that police leadership were resisting in Alberta, police associations and some police leaders were resisting in Ontario. And you've described it well. Here we are today with recommendations from some of the most egregious examples of death in Canada, where the reflection with judges and juries is that we need to do this. So what's stopping us? Is it, and what I'd love to know from both of your perspectives, is it provincial? Because again, one of the comments in the chat is that every police act is different. And can we not actually just build it from the provinces up? Because if we can't get Public Safety Canada and we can't get the RCMP to change, you have the purview to do it in the province.
I think that's my position. That's been my position from the beginning, Matt. And Dave and I have had this conversation right from the very beginning, is that I think a national framework of a college is actually, for me, it's too big of a vision at this point in time. It might be the ultimate big, hairy, audacious goal, but the initial steps, like the small steps towards professionalization, I think need to occur, at the unit level. So at like the police agency level, and then I think it also needs to occur at the provincial level first, and then we associate later. That would be my view, and I think to do that, there really needs to be a political will, because provincially a political will has to be there. A mandate has to be there, I think, to require police agencies, police chiefs to move in a certain direction. And that can be done by standardization. Like we have Alberta policing standards. They work great. They hold us accountable. There's 252 of them. We're assessed against them every 3 years. If you pass them, you're adequate and effective. But yet, at the same time, you know, there's nothing in Alberta that establishes what our academies have to teach for police training. There's nothing in our police foundational education programs for police validated learning outcomes that are established by policing for policing in the 2-year college diploma programs. There's a lot of standardization that isn't occurring. And I think as policing, we need to leverage that. Sorry, David has his hand up too. I think he wants to have something to say on that, maybe.
And Matt, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it is it's time. The conversation is timely, and I just thought I'd offer this for everyone. Our vision, the coalition's vision for a college, is to bring people together. The problem has been that, as Graham knows, Graham's done tremendous research on it. His paper goes in and it's shelved. You know, Matt, what's happened in Ontario. The approach to a college is shelved. In British Columbia, the same issue is it's shelved. And as you all know, when it comes to the important work that police officers do, if every one of the individual departments, and I'm just talking about training and education now, preparation, entry-level training, if everyone is doing it differently without any evidence-based or empirical studies or standards, that we're left with the same disruptive sort of service delivery right across our country. And the college should be seen, in our opinion, as a real benefit to the provinces. A college that does not provide oversight, but a college that does research, prepares a strong training and educational subject matter in current and relevant subjects, not a lot of the traditional things that we teach, and is available to the provinces. It saves a tremendous amount of money, even within the provinces. So the approach nationally is to bring everybody together, or to bring the provinces together, and to bring police organizations themselves that are struggling individually, even within their own provinces, to try and improve their own training. And if you have a gold standard, if you have a center for excellence, an organization like all other professions that does the research, and have it free, available to the provinces, and leave it to the provinces to make the decision as to whether they want to be a part of this. Most other professions have been successful that way. That's just my comment. It's you know, our coalition work is all about consulting, bringing people together to realize the benefit and the tremendous potential of a college that does not provide oversight. That's left to the individual. Licensing and oversight should always be left to the provinces under their existing Police Act legislation. Matt, I'm sorry, I see Cal Corley has his hand up, likely a comment, and I'll leave it at that. And I really appreciate all your comments. Please keep going. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Dave. Cal, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Matt, and thanks for the opportunity of listening intensely. And I guess, Dave, and you and I have had this conversation many times. I tend to agree with Graham that starting smaller at a provincial level on this makes a lot more sense. I mean, look at today's FedProv territorial discourse. I mean, we can hardly agree on the time of day as between the feds and the provinces. So it seems to me a bit of a bridge too far. Where I want to spend a moment, though, is Jim, you'd mentioned that you know, we in policing proclaim to be a profession, and that a college will go a long way. And I don't disagree with that. I think there's a tendency in the to look at what others can do to make us better in this particular context. And it strikes me that when I think about and there's an excellent piece of work that a friend of mine in Australia, Tracy Green, wrote a few years ago, and I'll share it with you, Dave, but it's on police professionalization. It's really, really nicely done. But you think of the characteristics, or the characteristics of a profession. So they've got a body of knowledge. Now, Matt talked earlier in terms of CPKN and certainly the Journal of Community Safety Wellbeing are two amongst others that are, you know, it's starting to advance. But I'd suggest that in a Canadian context, our own body of internal knowledge is we're still early in the game. We think of higher education and a commitment to lifelong learning. In policing, notwithstanding some of the efforts we've heard, there's a tendency to focus more on training than on education. The training often tends to be reactive, so there's been a major event and there's a reaction to it. If we think of trauma-informed investigations and trauma-informed responses is just one example. I was dealing with a major police service recently, and the superintendent there, because we're saying, you know, like, what have you done around, you know, he said, we are so far behind in terms of getting our frontline people, you know, adequately trained in trauma response to investigations. But higher education is another characteristic of a profession, and yet many still, and this is rank and file middle managers and some senior, still tend to poo-poo the idea that we need higher education in policing. I happen to disagree with that. We look at the Mass Casualty Commission. One of their recommendations as pertaining to the RCMP was around association of their training academy with an institution of higher education. And I know a lot of people inside the RCMP don't like that idea. Standards. Think of 8 years and the multiple millions of dollars that the Police Sector Council and all of us supported the work that they did around national standards. As soon as the federal government terminated the council, it was crickets, you know, and so God bless Sandy and his team continuing to try to advance that. There's good current activity in terms of trying to do that. And then finally, accreditation. Many amongst us would say that, you know, unlike nurses and that, and ongoing professionalization and accreditation is something maybe a bridge too far. But the first three of those are certainly ones that we can control within policing ourselves. Nobody else has to do anything to help build that body of knowledge. Nobody has to do anything other than leaders and police services boards in terms of expecting higher education and certainly standards. That's one that seems to me that if the CACP, CAPG, and CPA got solidly behind that, there's a tremendous move that can be made. In other words, there's a lot we can do to set the platform so that the table is set for an advancement to an eventual college. But it seems to me the first place we need to look is inside. Thanks.
No, thank you, Cal. That's great. And I'm really glad that you mentioned the work that CSKA and others are doing as well. And CSKA, the publisher of record of the Journal of Community Safety and Wellbeing, and the work that you're doing to further that knowledge exchange is really important. You know, the interesting part to all of this is, and I know Dave mentioned it earlier, that, you know, I've been very fortunate to have gotten involved over the last number of years and being asked to do some reviews of different police training that happens around the world. And I find it remarkable that there are developing countries around the world that have very structured education for and educational streams for police officers, right from university. It's like a university for the first front line, and if you want to become an inspector or above, you're talking probably a post-secondary, like a master's degree of some sort. These are developing countries around the world, and we've got some resistance in Canada and in Ontario. I think,
you know, can I say something, Matt? Cal Corley said something that's very important there. The principal police stakeholder groups in Canada have a huge opportunity. The CACP, the CAPG, and the CPA, they have a huge opportunity to bring this together rather than it being forced on them down the road. And the reason it's forced on us, change in policing, as you know, comes with a huge fight. But if there's a crisis or an event that creates a major change, that's when something happens in policing. And my sense is that unless CACP, CAPG, perhaps with the public safety minister begin to move on this, it eventually is going to be forced on us anyway down the road. And it's a huge opportunity to collectively work together. Now, building on Graham and Cal's comments, and perhaps even Jim's, and that is that if there is a province that's successful with a college and with standards that are credible and truly elevate the profession within a province and it's successful, that would be advantageous because the other provinces would recognize it. But my point has been, the history is showing that that is not going to happen. It's shelved in Alberta, shelved in BC, and is likely to be, and on Ontario, and likely to be shelved again. I only hope that our director, who's doing a study in Manitoba right now, Devon Clunas, is successful with a Manitoba model, which might begin to elevate it. But collectively, unless the police stakeholder groups and the coalition work together to try and find a way to build a model that is suitable for Canada, it will be forced on us. And it is actually, would be a huge advantage to the provinces themselves and the individual training entities in Canada and the police chiefs themselves to realize what they would get out of the Center for Excellence and what the college could do for them, all of the research, and leave it to the experts and is available to them. And Matt, I don't want to forget Mike, who has joined us. Maybe you could make a comment about Mike, and I'd be interested in his comments with respect to what's been discussed so far. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And this is a good time to maybe bring in Mike Fedorico, former Deputy Chief of Police with the Toronto Police Service, but has spent his entire, not his entire career, but the big part of his career on focused on education and training and furthering the education for policing, and has been working with Durham Regional Police after leaving Toronto and others, and has been a huge champion of this and the furthering of education for police officers. And why I think it's important to talk to have Mike speak for a few minutes, and we mentioned it earlier. Most recently, the inquest into the death of Sammy Yatim, young teenager shot and killed by Officer Forcillo from the Toronto Police Service on the subway. We can probably all, if we did, replay those horrible images in our mind's eye and reflect on that and the tragedy that was brought about. And Mike will speak to the recommendations that came from the inquest jury, but I think it's important because I'll try not to speak in terms of the people that were at the table, but when we were having this discussion about certifying police officers in Ontario, requiring mandatory education and training that are the standards, and that if you don't meet those standards, you would not necessarily be meeting adequate and effective policing, and as Chief Abela mentioned, no longer be a professional police officer until you meet that training and that certification, a body that would be able to take that away. And we used Forcillo as an example. Nothing in Ontario stops Forcillo from being a police officer again, notwithstanding that he's been, and he's now out of jail. So where are the standards? And where are the requirements and a body that can put those standards in place? So Mike, you can speak to the inquest in particular and the recommendation, how that was born, and what you understand it to mean.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I'd like to acknowledge the coalition and literally everybody who's participating today on their contribution to public safety and community well-being. Just a general observation, it's been my experience that some of the most progressive forces in Canadian society have come from policing and police leadership. So I congratulate you. Also, I just want to note how eager observers of police, reviewers of police, are in seeing us achieve what we profess we want to achieve, which is excellence. And I note the participation of several academics, those from the health profession, reviewers, as an example of that kind of commitment to support us. So just briefly, picking up on the momentum that police leaders have established about the need to provide consistency across the country. The Mass Casualty Commission made specific reference to establishing a national certification program to ensure standards. Now, while it was focusing on the RCMP, it certainly has implications for policing across the broader community. The team inquiry also picked up, and it did so based largely because it heard from police witnesses and those who support police on the attention they're paying to producing excellence in the realm of community safety and well-being. The police witnesses were particularly impressive in my view because they acknowledged that so much work needs to be done, but there's momentum and opportunity to build on some very well-established approaches to policing. And in Ontario, the efforts to try and create a cohesive approach to community well-being were appreciated by the inquest. So I see the inquest recommendations, which numbered 63, as very supportive of the efforts of the group here today. And there's an opportunity to build some momentum. There are some challenges, as people much wiser and better informed than I am have identified. But I would just like to offer a hopeful, encouraging outlook. The Mass Casualty Commission chair observed that, and I'm going to paraphrase here, just because something is complex is no reason not to try to address it. And so I get the sense here that while it's important we share what will be issues and potentially obstacles, they're not insurmountable. And so I think I'm certainly sensing from the group an encouragement to move forward. But there are some specific issues that need to be tabled. I'm not sure if it was Chief Abela or Chief McSween who said we need to start to define what the college is, or the national certification program actually is. And that requires some now, what I would view as some dedicated attention in perhaps establishment of a working group. So one of the questions today is, where do we go from here? So I'd like to table for discussion today, what concrete steps can we start to take? There was an observation just a few minutes ago about the constitutional jurisdictional issues between the federal government and the provinces. Even within the provinces, there are jurisdictional issues. Municipalities want to have greater say. Within the community members want to have greater say in the development of these professionalized, regulated institutions that need to be, they need to be heard. We need to be part of the discussion. And so what steps can this group gathered today take to actually practically move the initiative forward? So I'd be interested to hear some thoughts on that. There's a lot of people here, I'll speak for myself, who are prepared to invest the time. One of the big challenges that I'm sure everyone here appreciates, we've all experienced it, is the political inertia around trying to get these large-scale initiatives underway. And so some efforts to mobilize agencies that have influence with our political leaders. And I'll note that the coalition has already started by corresponding with the CACP to offer to join in appealing to the Minister of Public Safety to pay attention to the creation of these national initiatives, national standards, and national colleges. So I hope that small contribution on my part has helped. Thank you for the opportunity.
That was really helpful, Mike, and appreciate it, and thank you. And you can see from the chat as well that Stephen is saying that, you know, the CAPG and CPKN and the CACP are committed to working together on this. And comments made earlier about whether it starts in the provinces or it's at a national level, and from the sounds of it, but I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, it sounds like we're saying you got to do both. Sure, there are very clearly national bodies that are interested in this, but there are areas that the provinces can do and ought to do, and to their, you know, every police act is different across the country to varying degrees. They hold the keys for themselves. So to your point, you know, okay, so what do we need to do? What's next? take that next step forward. Chief McSween, OACP president. We've got a new police act in Ontario that's coming into force on April 1st. No joke. And what do we do? What do you do? What can be done?
Yeah, I think first I want to comment on the whole national framework. I don't disagree there needs to be conversation with public safety minister, but if that is the place we're going to go to get buy-in, we're going to be talking about this 10 years from now. We have to be doing it as opposed to talking about it. So again, I'll go back to the leadership development piece. What I saw, what many of us saw across, I'm not going to even get into any of these inquiries and everything, but we start to see the erosion of the leadership qualities that we believe we need today versus what it was to be a police officer 30 years ago. And I was here 34 years ago, so I know, but we could get by then, right? We could get by with experience, and leadership came with, who it was in the chair at the time based on how much they had command presence. And that all goes a long way as well. But if you don't have it, like in this day and age, I don't know how many more crises we have to see before somebody says, well, maybe we should look at it and take it seriously. We don't need another crisis. So, the idea of leadership is woven through the whole idea of a college. And I saw a few comments popped up here, and I wanted to just comment on it about, boards, for example. I'm not going to get into it, but I have some firsthand knowledge as the OACP president of boards who have failed their chiefs in this province in the last 6 months. And it was really, truly only because they didn't have a clue. They didn't know what their role was. And, depending on the relationship with the chief and its deputies, the board sinks or swims. And so, that is something that has to be fixed as well. And the new IG's office does have direct oversight in our province in Ontario over those boards now, with mandatory training, some forms of adequacy, and putting the right people on boards. So that in and of itself should be another signal that there's a need for change here in the whole model. And I think before a ministry tells us what the model is going to be, because I know what the outcome of that will be, we're not going to be happy with it. We want to get in front of it and build it ourselves and actually be a big part of the equation with, academics. And I'll just comment on that because it's kind of comical, actually, in a way. When we brought the academic institutions, I mentioned like de Groot and, Schulich into this discussion about leadership, I could already see backs getting up a little bit, right? Because why is that? That is culture in our profession that we've seen permeate over the last 50 years, that nobody is going to tell us what we should be doing. And look, leadership is leadership, right? And so, yeah, we need to lean on academic institutions to bring accreditation and rigor to processes. It's not to say we weren't doing things right, but let's modernize that and standardize that so everybody agrees this is what the leader of tomorrow and the future of policing looks like. And now let's build those people. Let's give them that whole rigor education throughout their career, so we know anybody lands in this chair as a chief in 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 5 years from now, they've been tested throughout this process, and there's no question that questions, so anyways, I just wanted to make those comments. I think it's important to understand boards as well and the role they play, because there is some comments about governance. So I hope I know I'm taking it a little off to one side or the other here, but
No, you're
my
not.
thoughts there.
You're not. And I want to ask Chief Abela a question, but before I do, I think you're on the mark, and you're right, because it's a number of the comments in the chat are there as well.
Just before the question, though, Matt, I just wanted to comment a little bit. I totally agree with Jim. And I think in other countries where professionalization has developed, academia and the profession, like of policing, have grown together. Like, and that hasn't happened in Canada. In the you know, when I put my academic hat on, I can tell you across the country, there's only a few, like there's, you know, universities that have actually supported policing as a profession and introduced like executive development program at that level, right? But yet with all the other professions who are deeply partnered with academic institutions across Canada, however informed by the profession, you have full baccalaureate degrees, graduate degrees, and PhDs offered in those fields. So whether you talk about nursing or teaching or lawyers, there has to be synergy with academia, and I don't think there's enough capacity within policing in Canada to actually build that ourselves. I just don't think there is. In 2013, we spent $57 per capita of every police officer in Canada on police leadership development and training. But, you know.
Right. Before I ask you a question, then Chief, I see Stephen Reed has his hand raised. Stephen, can you do you want to jump in?
Yes, I'm. You're bang on, Chief McSween. You highlighted a big structural problem within police governance, not just in Ontario, right across the country, and nobody knows it better than a lot of our members right now. So one of the first tasks that they've asked me to start working on is a national training program that could be adapted to across the country, because they go into these meetings and they don't know what they're supposed to ask. And often you will get some police services where the chief is telling the board chair what to do. And the other thing too is that money is a big challenge for some of the smaller police service boards right across the country. This is what I'm hearing from everywhere right across the country, especially on the small side. In fact, even right now, if you look at in Brandon, Manitoba, there was a big debate about whether to send their board directors to the conference, because it was considered to be a waste of money. This is part of the challenge, is that you have this governance structure that's ready to do something. However, the people are not properly trained to go in and ask the right questions and do the right job. And that is a big problem. And that also leads to the legitimacy problem of policing as well. So when you have a weak board, you may not have a board that's asking the right questions about a particular police service and why that public mistrusts them. Because I noticed a couple of comments on there saying they're trying to see the connection between the two. A good board helps build public legitimacy in that police service. And it has to be, as my colleague that I've heard him before, Chief Johnson, said, it's a collaborative relationship. When a good working service is one where the chief, the board, and the association are working collaboratively together. And that's the comment I want to make. It's a huge challenge. And then throw on top of that, you got a federal government right now that kind of pushes back and says, well, you know, it's the province's problem. And you have these political jurisdictions that are, if they don't want to deal with it, they don't want to touch it. And we are trying to work with the CPA and the CAPG, the CPKN and CACP on trying to develop some of these things, but the biggest obstacle is the federal government. So I'll just leave it at that.
May I just take an extra minute? About 2.5 years ago, there was a webinar at CAPG, and they're excellent, by the way. Chief McSween gave a presentation on tiered policing along with Inspector Skinner? It was Skinner. Well, I have never gotten over that one. I have spoken to everyone about it. It was so informative. And that led me to try and do that, spread some of this to the police service I was involved with. Not a moment's interest in it. I got a response was the union wouldn't like that. So I just thought, well, I don't know. It left me. I just thought there's no hope when people have no knowledge and they're not trying to get any, and they're not there for the reasons, for the right reasons. So it's the CAPG, that webinar. Honestly, Chief McSween, it just. I'm in admiration of what you accomplished with the tiered policing, and I kept sliding this into our meetings. What about suggesting this? Because costs are escalating. I know I'm going on. I should cut. Let somebody else make a comment, please.
Well, thank you, Shirley. And I think from the last number of comments, it sounds pretty clear that as much as we're talking about the need for educating and professionalizing policing, it same holds true for police board members, which is why in Ontario, as Jim mentioned, there is going to be a requirement for training and education. Interestingly, they need somebody to develop that, so it's good to hear that the CAPG and others are working on it. But Chief Abela, then you've done so much work in Alberta, laying this out, almost handing it right to the powers to be, and the traction's not there. What is being proposed as a next step in Alberta to help realize this as well?
So it does raise its head all the time at the Alberta Association of Chiefs of Police table. I sit there, and I'm the executive sponsor as well for the HR committee for the ACP. So it does get some traction. We do talk about it. I can tell you we have a really interesting research project coming up that I'm leading. So we're actually working towards developing learning outcomes for post-secondary educational institutions in our province that teach. There's 5 of them that teach law enforcement or criminal justice education, and we're going to develop with them learning outcomes that are going to be validated against policing in the province of Alberta, that we want the province to standardize through higher education, post-secondary education, into the curriculums of those programs. So at least we'll know that the learning outcomes that futuristic policing wants to see are taught in our foundational programs. Because right now that's not happening anywhere across the country. And hopefully from the lessons learned there, that might have some applicability in other provinces. And if that captures some traction, I think maybe we might see some more growth in that regard. I think leadership and the basic education training pieces really are the 2 places where policing can come together and actually start this process that you're talking about, and where we can get support nationally. These are for me the easy hanging fruit, right? I think that term's been used before for us to gain some momentum, and other things will grow from there. That's my suggestion.
Are those foundational? Yeah. Sorry.
That was Jim. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to make a quick comment about we were talking here. I heard some comment here about police legitimacy and public trust, right? And as we know, that's what many of these horrible situations without bad outcomes, that's how the light gets shined on our entire profession. But I think we have to, in some cases, we have to change this narrative around public trust and confidence, because there was a study pushed out across the country. I think it was through CBC. I can't remember who did it. And the public institution of policing was the most trusted institution in the country at 73%, while the 3rd least trusted institution was the media. But who gets all the story is the one incident that which causes the light to be shined on our profession, when there's thousands and hundreds of thousands of interactions that go on day in and day out, that cause the majority of the communities across the country to feel like we are the most trusted institution. I think how we start to break down these barriers of people buying into a college is to start talking about ourselves of going from good to great, instead of using look, there's outcomes on mass casualty inquiries, and we don't need inquiries to justify the need to do this. But if we want to get from here to here and be better than we are today, then that's how we should turn a positive, what can be many negative things into what's the positive side of this? The positive is the community generally likes the police, right? The study is there. So let's talk about going from where we are good to great and use all of those incidents as something we never forget and learn those lessons. And I think that's maybe a way to break down any of the fear that Graham talked about earlier about, why are police not buying in? Well, it's because we talk about it like it's broken as to the reason we need to fix it. And that's actually not the case.
Right. That's good. That's great. Mike, you have a comment?
Well, I just, in case there's an interruption and I'm not able to stay in, one of the questions that was repeated was, where do we go from here? I suggest one practical step is to form a working group. Now, that in itself, I recognize might be a bit of a challenge given a number of initiatives that are already happening across the province. But perhaps we could agree that the coalition's in a position to harmonize that. I sense from the audience there's some skepticism. We're going to see both at the provincial level and at the federal level, politically, an interest, especially at this time in our nation's interests. We're focused on external concerns, asking the public safety minister to start a working group. Probably won't get any real reaction if we're waiting for the minister to do it. But since the coalition has contacted the CACP to work collaboratively to enlist the minister, perhaps the coalition can consider now establishing a working group that is more practically oriented. From my personal experience and my sense, there seems to be no real reservation to the concept of elevating the standards of policing across the country. It's that there's some detail work that needs to be addressed. And the only way that's going to get addressed is if we dedicate resources to it. Thanks for the time.
Dave?
Mike, my sincere appreciation to you for your comments, of course, for all the comments too. And the coalition will commit ourselves to working in that realm, in a working group, forming a working group. But as you know, the coalition, as we all know, the coalition is a group of very dedicated volunteers, very dedicated board of directors, but we always need help. And might I just throw this out to all of the participants, everyone that's listening, if you'd like to be part of a working group, whether it's from the CAPG perspective, whether it's police chief perspective, like I really, truly appreciated Jim McSween's comments. The police services across the country provide tremendous work, but they can do much better. Let's just get better, and we know that. And that's really what we're trying to promote. So let's build on that, Matt. I know we're going to ask the question, where do we go from here? This is just one step, a great suggestion by Mike. The coalition is willing to commit to a working group, but we need help. We need knowledgeable people like yourselves, committed people like yourselves, and people that have a unique perspective. So I'm going to ask you all this before you continue, Matt, and that is that if there are people, would you please communicate with myself or Dr. John Lilly? Just go to our website. In fact, I'm going to put my email address, my personal email address in the chat, and just send me a quick note, and maybe we can begin to form a working group. And I would also like somebody to sort of take ownership of it. I might seek someone. Mike, you might have an interest to chair the working group, to begin to look at the 4 or 5 critical issues that we should look at as we move this forward. And of course, Mike, we're hoping the CACP responds in a positive way. So I'll just leave it there. I ask you for your help. Don't hesitate to contact us. I'll put my personal email address in the chat. And Matt, thank you. Go ahead.
Well, thanks, Dave. That's great. And I know we are kind of running near the end, so everybody's got busy schedules. So maybe just I'll go to you first, Chief Abela, and then to you, Chief McSween. You know, one idea, one recommendation or suggestion, might just put it on the table. From your perspectives, what would be the next steps, or what would we need to do to move forward? And is there something that we can help in Alberta? When I say we, I mean collectively this group, not necessarily just the coalition.
You know, it's a great conversation today, and I think there's some great ideas put forward. In my view, in my mind, it's moving from vision to a more tactical understanding of what's going to happen. I think I've explained that before. I need a model. We need, for me, a model that we can beat about to make better, like a draft model that we can see. Because I think the word professionalization actually scares people. I added it to the 4 Ps now. It used to be police, parents, and probation that were the 3 scary things, and now professionalization is the 4th one. The language around it that we're going to use, I think we need to be careful, because a lot of policing already sees itself as professional. But the definition, the true academic definition of a professional college, we're not there. But I think people get scared, and that fear of change, managing that fear, I think it's something that this group should pay close attention to as well. But my final comment is, let's get going on the leadership, and let's go on the basic education and training piece. And Global Studies even made that as a suggestion a couple of years ago at the CACP. So I think that's where we have to start.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you mentioned Global Studies, because you're right. They're 1 or 2 of their reports spoke to this as well. Chief McSween.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I think Graham hit on many of them, but I think one thing we have to do, at least in Ontario, I'll only be sitting in this chair for the next 3 months, but have a very frank, open conversation with the inspectorate because our inspector general is actually going around the province now and visiting all the boards and visiting all chiefs, and I have a regular sit down with him. I think Graham touched on it: leadership and the tactical, the education components, the training. So what I'm going to do is we're going to find, my goal is to finish this leadership program, this provincial model at the OACP, and then have it endorsed and funded by the ministry and used as an example of how we need to create a college. And everything that the IC programs, the educational programs, we already have an independent hearing adjudicator process through OPAC now that's going to be rolled out come start April 1st, So the pieces are all there, like I said before, but I want to use this as almost like a pilot and a demonstration of how this could look across the industry standard, at least in the province, and engage the IG and have a meeting amongst the OACP and all the major contenders or contributors and stakeholders with the IG to have the conversation and ask some questions about, is this the vision of the Inspector General? Because as I see it, Matt, and I'm not sure your perspective, like it just reaps to me an understanding that they believe, maybe not openly right yet because they're trying to walk before they run because they've got a lot of work to do. But they probably do believe themselves that this is the first step towards professionalization and eventually getting to a college. So,
right.
I think that meeting has to happen, and it'll definitely be happening over the next few months. Actually, we're going to present to the IG this whole leadership development model with academia so they can understand it. They've asked for it. So there's a lot of interest in it. So I think that has to happen. Just one item anyways.
Well, thank you. And thanks for that. And I think judging from the number of people that have been on this webinar and the conversation in the comments, you're right. There is a tremendous amount of interest and desire to see this come to fruition. And I want to thank both of you, Chief Abela, Chief McSween, everyone that's participated, and the questions both in the comments and those that spoke. Dave, John, and your team for putting this together. I don't know if you have any closing remarks, Dave or John, but I want to thank you for the opportunity to moderate as well. It's been wonderful.
Well, Matt, let me extend my personal appreciation to you. I know you've got a busy schedule. You bring a wealth of information and background. You've always been very supportive of our initiatives, our mission, our vision. I hope we can sort of work together as a team, and I want to thank you for keeping the conversation going very well. Both Graham and Jim, as usual, you did an excellent job. You both brought down some excellent points of which I've made a comment on, and I would hope that all of the others would think very seriously about my email is my personal email is in the chat. You can get in contact with John and I on our website at c-cpr.com. And I want to thank you for contributing. If there's someone that would like to work on the working group, please just shoot me an email. I already have a couple, and I'm very pleased. I also just want to quickly recognize two people and thank them for attending today. Jackie Waskey, the former chief from Winnipeg, and Vince Hawks, the former commissioner from the RCMP, from the OPP. Both thanks for being with us today. Lastly, everyone, if you're not a member, please join the coalition. It's a very nominal fee, and it keeps you informed. It keeps us informed. And again, if there's any suggestions or advice or guidance that you'd like to give to the coalition, we are not offended by anything. That's the only way that we learn. We are committed to moving our mission and vision forward. Someday this will come to fruition. We may all be long gone, but I will guarantee you that someday this will come to fruition. And I think it's far more important that the principal police stakeholder groups be a part of this and collectively develop either the implementation of a college or national training standards that they are part of developing. We will have far more success and acceptance that way. So don't hesitate to join us and don't hesitate to communicate with us. And my sincere appreciation to everyone for attending. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.